Redditors from small towns, what was your town's big scandal dirty secret? Students were not supposed to leave campus for lunch. Some students were allowed to leave campus. They might be gone for some time. It turned out they were going with one of the secretaries to the nearby National Guard armory and were drinking and ducking some of the guardsmen. These were 15-17-year-old girls. We did end up on Below Riley for a very brief segment. Several dozen tourists parked their cars on the frozen lake when it wasn't adequately thick ice. Their cars went for an unexpected dip in the lake. The whole town was talking about it, but everyone was split between sympathy for the people and those who thought it was funny that the tourists hadn't thought their parking choice through or bothered to ask a local about the ice. It actually made the town a little tense for a while, with half the people thinking it was shitty that some locals thought it was funny. Which is fair. And the other group thinking it's okay to laugh at the city folk being a bit naive. Which is kinda fair too. My neighbor Kevin. His wheelie bin was stolen over the weekend. It's been the talk of the village. Police have been and taken statements. No further action taken. The little town in Oregon I used to live in, we had a state rep and state senator who were married and been in their office for 10-15 years. Lifers, so it was rare anyone ran against them. Their last election they registered to run, and then 15 minutes before the deadline they announced they were dropping out and their friends announced they were running, effectively ensuring that no one else had a chance to get on the ballot. The reps claimed they had no idea, but that state passed the law named after them called the Howitzer Law that if a sitting official stepped down it extended the period others could enter to prevent this. My school promised our science teacher a certain amount of money, but when payday came they didn't pay her the amount that was promised, so she left our school and we had no science teacher. Just other teachers with science degrees. So an English teacher was put to science. A history teacher was put to English. A Spanish teacher was put to history. And Spanish was now being taught online, which must have been hell for that class. An ex-friend of mine from high school beat his non-verbal autistic 5-year-old son to death and hid the body. It will be a year next month and they still haven't found his body. There's a girl from my town that was kidnapped and found 29 days later. Kidnapped by 3 men who did some horrible shit to her. Her mom has really tried to push it for publicity. And she is going to be on the DR. Phil show soon. She goes to my high school. And she always looks so sad. The sad thing is because her parent is using her for publicity. She will never have a normal life without people knowing who she is. I feel so bad for her. She's such a sweet girl who has gone through too much. My town was incorporated in 1952 in an effort to keep black people out of the neighborhoods and schools. They used zoning laws and property taxes to keep low-income housing from ever developing. About 20 minutes away is a city with a lot of gang violence. It has 3x the national mayor rate and isn't even a major metropolis. The chief of police of this little town was caught selling weapons and bulletproof vests to these gangs. 4 years. He was also protecting local meth labs. Worst part is, he escaped and no one seems to care. Edit, please stop asking me where this is. A girl hid her entire pregnancy. All while having her boyfriend at the time try to literally beat her into a miscarriage. She eventually gave birth in her bathroom. Hid the baby in her closet, then went and had dinner with her mom like nothing happened. She ended up killing the baby. Putting it in a duffel bag with a bunch of stones and throwing it in a quarry. Some lawyer's wife went missing. There was a big search effort to find her, including Air Force jets flying over the surrounding woods to find recently disturbed ground, indicating a possible burial. They couldn't find her for days until finally a neighbor went to the media to point out the lawyer had remodeled the sitting area in his garden recently, including pouring himself a nice big concrete slab right outside his back door the day before he reported his wife missing. Sure enough, they dug up that area and found her body. What was really stupid is a neighbor told this information to the police as soon as he heard the wife was missing. Then again 2 days later. And they did nothing with it until he went to the press. A girl I went to school with got knocked up by a fellow student at the age of 14. Because 14-year-olds are known for making exceptionally good decisions, See the previous sentence. She decided to name it Holly Davidson. Because why not? This happened on Monday. A car, a large truck and a motorcycle were involved. Motorcyclist was looking at his phone on a dual carriageway. Crashed into the back of a truck. Truck was so busy looking behind him that he hadn't realized he was about to hit a taxi. It was a ducking disaster. 4 people were involved. 1 survived. The whole front half of the taxi was literally flattened. Nothing this major has happened in our town since we've been living here, almost 7 years. The whole motorway was obviously closed and we got home about 30 minutes late. There must have been about 25 police cars there. And even an air ambulance was there. I've never seen anything like it. People are still talking about it now. People who don't even live in my town are talking about it. A professor from our small community college was shot and killed by his son with a crossbow. Also some high school wrestlers waterboarded another student. And all they got was a suspension from a wrestling match. Lived in a small town of under 1,000 residents. 2 brothers from overseas came to our small town to be the local doctors. Both were married and brought their families with them. Within 6 months I noticed a very noticeable change in my local pharmacist. She had received very large breast implants. Turns out the DR and pharmacist were having an affair and he bought her breast implants. Everyone in town knew and they would often frequent local sports games or town social events, even though he had a wife and kids back home. The government awarding several million pounds to a shipping company that would operate out of our town in the event of a no-deal Brexit. The company had no ships and had copied their terms and conditions from a takeaway. In my town about 2 years ago we had a Dropbox fiasco where kids in the higher grades had a massive Dropbox full of female students' nudes. Last year in my school we had swastikas appearing all around the campus along with a shotgun shell. The day after they found the shotgun the school decided to put everyone in the gymnasium. The dumbest decision I've ever seen. About a year after I graduated high school a local girl a couple years younger than me went missing. Turns out her boyfriend killed her for trying to break up with him and he buried her in his grandmother's garden. My school's French teacher had an affair with the history teacher during a trip to France. Her husband found out about it and came to the school screaming, "How many times did you duck my wife?" to him and a room full of 8th graders. The history teacher's wife was pregnant at the time and lost her baby from the stress. The police chief got paid overtime his last 3 years, super illegal, and that was what his retirement was based off of. Then we elected him to a judgeship. There's a few. But most disgusting was a couple years ago a local cop's son got charged with a slew of pedo and bestiality crimes. Several kids over the course of years. And 2 of the guy's ex-GFs were charged as well. Evidently his GFs would babysit children and he would do sick sheet to them and film it. They haven't released exactly how involved the GFs were but I know at least one is out loving with her parents. He only got caught because one of his victims didn't want to see it happen to her little sister and reported it. Never met the guy but he used to work with my ex and invite us out all the time. I never agreed, thank duck. I wouldn't say Nottingham is a small town. But a while ago a crazy guy in a green outfit stole a bunch of money from the rich people in town. This last election we had one guy get arrested for child porn and a chick get outed for selling her panties online. In junior high we weren't allowed to carry bags of any sort with us to class. A gay kid brought his purse to class and refused to put it in his locker when the teacher told him to. Anyway he got suspended or something after him and the teacher got into a big argument. The fiasco made statewide news and got turned into a discrimination issue. Though I can't really say it was one. I wouldn't say I lived in a small town. But in my town there was. Have seen her in a while and she is quite elderly. A woman who would walk around screaming and yelling "Don't touch me" and assholes and other profanities. That woman was sexually assaulted and the system basically failed her. She was left homeless and without proper care. She roams the streets. Psychologically damaged and alone. When you ask people about her, they will mainly tell you she's crazy. You know druggies but that isn't the truth. The poor woman had much to endure in her life and simply broke. Often I want to try helping her in any way I can, but whenever people approach her she becomes scared and aggressive. There's a religious cult that makes up roughly 50% of the population of my town, 1,200 people. Loki, some things have occurred. Excommunication is one of their primary methods of dealing with people who don't follow their laws. In my town we have this place that people refer to as Narnia. It's just an abandoned house that's falling apart. But every once in a while drug dealings go on there. Because it's right next to a secondary school, loads of teenagers go there to get cigarettes, vapes, weed, beer, etc, but the teachers can't do anything because it's off school property. A pizzeria and a convenience store blew up about a year apart from one another in the 90s. No one charged, but basically every local my age or over knows who did it. Not a super small town, but there's a trendy bakery cafe hangout type shop in one of the suburban hubs here called Greens and Company. In 4 years it has continuously been graffitied to read Greens and Big Dig. Whenever they try and remove the graffiti it turns up again a few days later, so they've just given up and have left it to say Greens and Big Dig permanently. Nobody knows who is doing it. We had an 80-year-old dude get arrested for walking around his pasture in nothing but a shirt and tennis shoes and ducking his cows. The guy who took all our school little league etc. pics from pre-K through 12th grade was arrested for child porn. Not exactly a small town. About 100,000 people. But one of the local high schools has an unusually high amount of 6 offenses. About 8 years ago, a coach held himself days after being questioned about whether he had an inappropriate relationship with a student. About 2-3 years after that, a female teacher was arrested for having an explicit relationship with a student. About 2 years after that, a wealthy man in the area was found running paying numerous high school girls from a few schools for sex, with at least one girl being from this school. And just a few days ago, another teacher was arrested for possession of child porn. This is all at one normal-sized school, not the district. Only the wealthy guy incident involved other schools, in less than 10 years. Our mayor literally just got arrested by the FBI. Like 3 days ago. I think it was for misuse of campaign funds. I guess he had a lovely trip to the Caribbean. He's allegedly a wife beater too. Cops showed up to his place a couple times because his wife called. There's other stuff too, but that's the biggest one yet and it's super recent. Our mayor, a woman at the time, would buy clothing at the local herbages, remove the tag, then reattach the tag to another older, but similar looking price of clothing. After that she would return the newly tagged item for a refund. As I recall, she had to resign in disgrace. This was maybe 15 to 20 years ago. EDI, grammar. There is a convicted cannibal in our town. Seriously. He killed his friend while being drunk, then ate his jaw. He had his trial, went to prison, but was set free because the largest political party in the country wanted to free their leader from the prison. Corruption. In a legal way. This meant that many criminals were pardoned. Also, he is a drug addict. He sniffed glue on a daily basis. Edit. Spelling. A guy who'd been convicted of pedophilia got out and went home. Half the neighborhood turned out to and welcome him back. Trapped inside, he came up with an escape plan. He set his own house on fire, with himself inside, and called 911. There was a large heating oil tank attached to his house. And if it had gone up it would have lit off the whole neighborhood. So he got quick emergency response to escort him out of the situation. But he wasn't in good shape when they dragged him out. Kinda reminds me of a smaller case at school. Guy got in an argument with his pregnant ex because he didn't want a kid and during the argument pushed her down the stairs. She was okay and the baby turned out fine. He proceeded to get beat up at least 3 times within the next day. He had to have security escort him to the Greyhound station to get a bus out of state. Small town justice can get pretty intense.